Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for spending your Thursday evening with us. My name is Mona Shamali. I'm the director of the New Leaders Initiative, and I'm going to speak for just a few minutes before we start this amazing panel. So bear with me as I just walk through some introductions here. So thank you again. It's going to be a very moving and intimate panel. I hope you will all be as touched as I was when I first heard these alumni speak about their emotional responses to the climate crisis. This panel is a part of a new ongoing series where we feature a few Brower Youth Award alumni in a more in-depth conversation for the length of 1 hour. The panel is produced by the New Leaders Initiative, which is a North American, including Canada and Mexico, environmental leadership program that builds and cultivates youth leaders by building their capacity through intensive week-long trainings, workshops, clinics, skill-building activities, and training in the writing and fine arts mediums as a call for action. We also have university fellowships and finally public-facing events in the Bay Area. Both the panelists and the facilitator tonight are alumni of the Brower Youth Awards, the flagship program of New Leaders. Each year, out of a competitive pool of applicants, the Brower Youth Awards, the award celebrates their achievements by making short documentaries about them, providing a cash prize, and culminating in a leadership week. New Leaders and the Brower Youth Awards are a program of a larger organization, Earth Island Institute. Founded in 1982, Earth Island Institute is an international environmental organization and fiscal sponsor to more than 75 projects working in the areas of climate change solutions, conservation, environmental justice, indigenous communities, wildlife protection, women's environmental leadership, sustainable agriculture and food systems, community resilience, and more. The organization also includes a legal division, Earth Island Advocates, a youth development department, the New Leaders, and an award-winning magazine, Earth Island Journal. For more information, please visit our website at www.earthisland.org. And now for our bios for the panelists and the facilitator. Our facilitator this evening is Jess Rimington, a BYA alumni. Jess Rimington is a next economy strategist, practitioner, and scholar who helps businesses and organizations step into economic paradigms that work for everyone. She draws on a decade of research to support brave leaders in reimagining work and capital structures for both enterprise success and a world rooted in shared power and prosperity. Her research demonstrates how shared decision-making and collective agency catalyzes innovation and resilience. From 2015 to 2022, Jess co-directed the Beloved Economies research. She co-authored Beloved Economies, Transforming How We Work. She is a winner of the 2022 Porchlight Business Book Award in Management and Workplace Culture, and she now co-leads an economic innovation firm advancing pro-democracy business community. As for our alumni panelists, the first one is Kyle Trefny. In 2022, Kyle helped organize a meeting between young fire workers and the chief of the U.S. Forest Service to discuss young people's stake in wildfire workforce and management policies. This led to his founding of Fire Generation Collaborative, a youth-led organization that aims to transform our relationship with fire from short-term disaster response and unstable jobs towards long-term resilience efforts, healthy livelihoods, and the recentering of indigenous leadership. Trefny co-led FireGen's national campaign, which called for formal roles for youth in wildfire policy, endorsed by student and worker groups across 25 states. The Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission responded, and several FireGen members and fellow young workers and indigenous practitioners became some of the first youth fire experts to ever advise a federal commission. FireGen advances indigenous leadership and opportunities for frontline workers and youth to have a voice in their future. Our second alumni joining us tonight is Inaam Chattha. As a teenager living in rural Alberta, Canada, Inaam watched wildfires inch closer to his home each year, listened to evacuees share their grief at his family's dinner table, and silently carried eco-anxiety without realizing what it was. In 2023, Chattha launched Green Mind with a simple goal to ensure that no young person feels as unsupported as he once did. Since then, the project has grown into a national youth-led initiative that co-creates culturally grounded educational materials to help youth cope with climate anxiety while empowering them to take action. Green Mind's Climate Wellness Toolkit, a bilingual resource, is now used in classrooms and summer camps in Ontario to help youth understand and regulate their co-anxiety through somatic grounding, journaling, and peer connection. Chattha, now a medical student, has also authored two children's books, Tori the Tornado and Lila and the Cloud of Change, which are being used in schools to help children navigate eco-emotions through storytelling. Last year, he was named one of Canada's top 25 under 25 environmentalists by Starfish Canada. Now, I would like to invite everyone to start this amazing panel. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone at home. And I'm going to pass it over to Jess Rimington to facilitate our panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mona. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Quick PSA, recovering from surgery. Sorry that you all have to witness my elevation here, but hopefully not too distracting. So I know Mona shared a bit about both of your all's work, but wondering if there's anything else you'd be open to sharing about what you did that got the attention of our Youth Awards and how you think it relates to the conversation this evening. Maybe we'll start with Inaam.
Oh, perfect. I was just looking at Kyle's and he unmuted his mic, but I can start us off. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm really grateful to be here and doing this webinar. I'm joining from the traditional territories of Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations in Canada, and it's a little cold here relative to where some folks might be joining in from. I've been in the environment space for about 7 years now, and a lot of my work has been fragmented in doing water conservation, and then more recently been doing work related to climate anxiety. And when I look back and reflect on my journey, honestly, it started accidentally. It wasn't intentional. It was a story of a young boy who looked at situations around him and thought, you know what, maybe we can do something here. And that's how my climate work started. The town that I lived in when I was younger was close to a lake. And one day, it was when I was doing cross country, I noticed that there was a very strange smell coming in from the lake. And the color of the lake also changed during the spring and summer months. And I thought to myself, that's not how lakes should look like or smell like. And through some student activism work, we did cleanups around the lake and tried to improve the water quality there. And then as I started undergrad, I started looking at the environmental impacts through an emotional lens. And there were papers that were coming out that said 50 to 60% of youth were feeling emotions related to climate anxiety. And a lot of my colleagues and peers felt those emotions, and that's where Green Mind started. And some of the work that we do is normalizing those conversations and making sure that there are resources available for young people if they're feeling emotions related to eco-grief or climate anxiety.
Thank you so much for sharing. Passing to you, Kyle.
And thank you so much for starting us off. It's always great to get to hear your story, and I feel like every time I learn something more. It was an honor to be one of the awardees alongside Inaam and others earlier this year. But yeah, my name is Kyle. I'm a white settler of West European and Jewish descent. I live on Ramaytush Ohlone lands in San Francisco, California. It's where I grew up and where I am calling in from today. It's probably about 50 degrees, maybe 70 degrees warmer than where Inaam is currently. But yeah, similarly, I feel like our journeys in the climate space don't start all at once. It starts like little by little. And when I was younger, probably one of the first things that I was like introduced to this space through was just like the kind of conventional concepts around the endangered species crisis. And I worked at the San Francisco Zoo for 6 years when I was younger, and I also like would use my art, like drawing and painting, to raise funds for like wildlife conservation. But eventually, it started to get more kind of politically and historically engaged. And so in high school, I saw that there was an environmental club, and I met this awesome classmate, Grace, who co-founded an environmental club with me at our high school. So we did, different organizing. It reminds me, tomorrow, there's a general strike happening for many people here in the US. And I know that high schoolers are going to be on the front lines of that. And it reminds me of my time in high school, and kind of the youth organizing that was really powerful in the like 2016 to 2020 period that I was in school. So yeah, that was a huge introduction for me. And then in 2020, just as I was graduating, we had a really severe wildfire season in Northern California and around the West Coast. And many people lost their lives, lost their homes. It was very overwhelming, and it also was not the first time. This had been happening almost like every year for that time period. And yeah, I really wanted to get more involved. I'd been doing some different fundraising drives, but I wanted to become a wildland firefighter. So I started training. My uncle is a physical trainer, and so he helped me make a plan. And I was always so intimidated by him because I'm this skinny kid and he's like super buff. But he helped me make a plan to train, and then I became a firefighter in the summers while I was going to college. Been doing that since 2021, and yeah, and then I eventually started organizing with the group that we with my introduction earlier. So yeah, I guess that's a little backstory.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I would guess that every single person in this virtual room this evening has had an emotional response and anxiety as it relates to the climate crisis. And you both have lived through and thought deeply about the climate crisis. And I'm curious, what are some ways that you've developed to frame the crisis in your minds, your hearts, and through your actions that have helped you and maybe others that you've worked with?
I think for me, the first step is acknowledging that these emotions exist. There's just so much stigma around climate change, and then unfortunately, so much stigma about mental health. And then when we talk about climate anxiety or eco grief, it's really at the intersection of two very stigmatized topics, and that further makes seeking help or accessing resources much more difficult. So I think the first step always has been to acknowledge that, there's nothing wrong with caring about the climate, or nothing wrong with feeling a certain way, feeling fears of worry, or fear about what the future may look like or what the planet may look like. And after one has acknowledged, I feel like for me personally, the biggest step came from just looking at people around me and acknowledging that I wasn't having an isolated experience. There were people and my colleagues and collaborators that had felt similar emotions and were also looking for materials or for support that can guide them through what they were feeling. And I personally found immense strength in a community, in talking about my feelings. A lot of times, we tend to hesitate by being honest, or tend to hesitate from the fact that, oh, we feel a certain way, maybe other people don't resonate, so we shouldn't share our feelings. But for me, the biggest triumph in terms of reframing came from acknowledging it and then also sharing my story with other people. And I think that just snowfalled into what the organization became. With Green Mind, like I said, it wasn't really an intentional thing that I wanted to do this. It came from conversations with people working in the environment space and people not working in the environment space, and seeing how many folks felt these emotions. There have been a couple of papers done by United World Health Organization, and then also more Canadian papers that looked at how prevalent climate anxiety was among youth. And a lot of these papers found that 50 to 60% of young people feel emotions related to eco grief. So that prevalence also was something that encouraged me to some degree that, hey, there's a massive gap here, and maybe we can do something to address it. So I think for me, coming back to the question, reframing comes from first acknowledging and then finding support in community around us.
What would you say to that, Kyle?
I would first of all just echo a lot of what Inam said. That'll probably be a theme today. But yeah, I think also like understanding climate change for me has been shaped over time by kind of being in experiences that make me question some of the assumptions that I originally brought into this space. And so, for example, I grew up with like a significant fear of fire. And when we were having more wildfires, I was essentially under the impression, and I think it's a widespread like viewpoint, that wildfires are essentially like the harbingers of increasing climate change here in the Western US. And I didn't really know that much about fire outside of the like climate crisis context. But something that I've gotten from working more in the fire space is realizing that our landscapes in this region have actually been shaped by regular cycles of fire for thousands of years, and that prior to colonization, there was actually more fire in the Western US than we see in even some of the largest fire seasons, but it was less severe. And so it was largely either ignited by lightning or stewarded by indigenous peoples. And people lived very closely with fire, and were able to coexist and manage it in really sophisticated and successful ways, as far as like living in place-based ecosystems here. And so I think that, that complicates our understanding of the relationship between fire and climate, which there is a strong relationship, and fire is returning at a widespread level under the climate crisis, and we're seeing different kinds of fire. But I want to like bring this larger metaphor of like understanding climate, not just in terms of, for example, CO2, but also understanding it in the lens of broken relationships between people and land, or at least damaged relationships and the attempted breaking of them, and understand it in relationship to colonialism, and understand it not as just this urgent fight that we all feel. We have 10 years, 5 years, what is it, 3 years left or whatnot at this point. But like this understanding that this is a struggle against exploitative economic systems, exploiting land, exploiting people, that is, a multi-hundred-year struggle, and it's ongoing. And so I think that allows us to see ourselves as part of a longer effort, and that makes it feel encouraging because there's a long history of people doing really amazing things to challenge those trends. Another one is just the aspect of when we think of the climate crisis just in kind of an atmosphere context, it can feel very out of reach in a way. But when we think of it as damaged relationships, as like a crisis of political will or power, or of a need for more imagination and creativity, loving relationships, political power, imagination, creativity, those are all things that we as individuals and especially as collective groups can wield and hold. And so then when we recognize that we have those opportunities, I feel like there's a lot of potential there for us to feel empowered and feel less afraid of the time that we're living in.
So well said. A lot of that really resonates with me from what you both shared. I've also had this experience where, there's privilege in having been able to have had exposure to, however one got there, to organizing spaces, to have community around principled struggle, around this fight and struggle. And sometimes I'll talk to people who don't have community where this is talked about, in the ways that perhaps you both have in the communities you've built and that I've been lucky enough to experience in my life as well. And I'm curious for someone who maybe feels like really resonates with everything you're sharing, but also feels really isolated in their own emotional experience around climate anxiety or eco grief. What advice would you have for them in growing and developing emotional resiliency in community? Like, what steps should they take? Whoever wants to jump in.
Go for it, Kyle.
Okay, well, I'll just start off honestly saying that I'm really inspired by people like Inaam, for not only translating your own feelings into action and like the volunteer work that you did, but also then seeing the need to create spaces where people can talk about destigmatized conversations like eco grief, and receive resources, but also be in community with other people who have similar feelings, which, like you've mentioned, is really prevalent. And for me, it was just finding friends, even just the person like sitting across from me in math class freshman year of high school, who feel similarly. And when we realized there wasn't a group at our high school, we created one and a bunch of people came to it. And at one point we had like 10% of the school in our group. And yeah, I mean, I think that those spaces, and there are so many, like I just really emphasize the opportunity of joining organizations. And if you don't see an organization that you feel like you're comfortable in or that represents what you're looking for, finding maybe just one person to start something with and seeing where that takes you. But I really feel a lot of my isolation or emotions changing when I'm in working with other people, and being able to have like conversations with people who understand that background. And honestly, it can even just be like a book club, like with a friend, and you can invite a couple others and just read things and be able to talk about that. But then also moving that toward like other kinds of action is really powerful too.
That was so beautifully put, and I'm going to steal your answer here. For me, it's community as well. And I've also been really fortunate that I've been a part of so many different circles, and I've learned a different skill or a different way to cope from each of those circles, be it a book club, be it a student club, or some of the leadership roles that I've done more professionally. Another thing that has helped me come out of those feelings are I don't want to use the word conquer, but to some degree manage them adequately, has been leveraging my strengths. For me, I love I love art, and then I also love bridging scientific evidence with some of those artistic tools. So for me, when I was doing my undergrad, one of the things that really stood out to me is how much information scientifically was there in publications and in journals, but it was never translated to public policies or wasn't even disseminated properly to the public. And when I started reading those journals, that's where some of the ideas about how it could be better translated came. And then I reached out to other people who were interested in similar ideas and wanted to take those tasks with me. So that's how that project started. And when I look back at it, it was a matter of first acknowledging, that I really like doing this, really like reading and disseminating scientific information, and then finding a group around that mission or around those values that people believed in. Another thing that really resonated with me was art. Some of the climate anxiety work that I've done recently has involved working on children's books and trying to make those emotions or portray those emotions in a way where somebody who is a 5-year-old can understand that, and similarly a 10 or a 12-year-old can also understand that. And illustrating those books and writing those books has been a journey, but has also allowed me to connect with other people, to collaborate with other folks, and find that strength and a sense of a community.
But you're illustrating your books too?
Yes, I am.
My gosh, polymath over here. He's like, yeah, I just translate scientific papers and happen to illustrate kids' books as well. Okay, that's a good segue to our next question about creativity. But just to summarize, I think some of the takeaways here. So I feel like what y'all are saying is like, even if you feel like, you don't know where to start in building community around this, it could be as simple as the person already sits next to you in math class, or just striking up a conversation and seeing. You could create the forum, like a book club, and also, like to your point, and like follow what's bringing you enthusiasm and passion, and then know that there'll be a community of people around that too, and then not be afraid to bring up what worries you, and the anxieties within that space. Is that resonating? Did I get some of that right? Anything y'all would add? Okay. So one of the things that we all wanted to talk about here tonight too, for y'all listening, is around creativity, which amazing combination of different artistic pursuits you just mentioned there, Nam, to be able to pull all of that off. How do you think creativity can be a part of building emotional well-being for oneself in face of climate anxiety or grief, and also towards like imagining and moving towards alternative futures? What have you found in positive futures that hopefully are to come? What have you found in your work and lives to date?
One of the things that I feel like I just feel like creativity is such a healing process for people. And there's like people just love it. I mean, like, I don't know, a lot of us spend so much time on our screens and on these other things. And of course, there's some awesome creativity you can make digitally. But if you invite people to like even just get some chalk and then like draw like murals on like the sidewalk, or like the other day my friend was visiting in town and I was like trying to think up ideas of what we'll do together, and so I wrote up a couple like quote unquote out of the box ideas, and I'm like, what if we just go to the road by my house, and there's people walking down it, it's kind of like a boardwalk, and what if we just offer free portraits to anybody who wants them? And my friend is a photographer, and I like to draw and paint, but you don't have to be good. I was making these in 10 minutes. They're not beautiful, but it's creating the joy, and it's creating something spontaneous and different for people in their kind of day-to-day routines. And yeah, we took like 7 photo portraits. I made 3 painted portraits, and then we also offered advice. And we had one person come up to us asking for advice. But just something different, right? Like just doing something that feels out of the ordinary, and just kind of letting your mind wander and think, what if? And I love that aspect of creativity.
The what if.
No, that was so beautifully put. For me, coming at it from more of a philosophical point of view, everything that has ever been done or ever been invented, or all the ideas that we talk about, somebody first thought about it and then tried to find a creative way to either disseminate that or act on it or develop it into a practical thing. And I think for me, creativity is about asking questions, asking what if, or asking how can this be done differently. When we talk about the climate crisis, it is one crisis that is so prevalent, and it is also a crisis that is affecting so many sectors around our economies. It is affecting healthcare, it is affecting steel, it is affecting our lakes, it's affecting tariffs now as different countries decide what they prioritize politically. So I think creativity also comes from how can these problems that are leading to the climate crisis, how can they be solved more creatively. Somebody who came up with an idea of a solar panel or a windmill thought about it creatively and tried to figure out how to bridge the carbon dioxide emissions coming from the energy sector. So I think there are opportunities to be creative in any way you can, or any issue that you want to take on, be it just giving free portraits, or doing wind turbines, or more solar panels.
How do y'all, in the face of, I assume, in your work and your day-to-day life, witnessing and standing with the truth and the hardship and challenges of what we face as it relates to climate, how do you stay emotionally open to that and not burn out?
Yeah, so I'll touch on this a little bit, and I work currently half-time as a researcher at the University of Oregon. I work half-time at the nonprofit I co-founded, Fire Generation Collaborative, and in that, especially in my research role, I'm like learning as much as I can about the histories of how people manage fire and live with fire and work with fire, and then like all the policy recommendations that people have and how long many of those policy recommendations have been not implemented, and about the histories of different like movements in this space, and what people think the futures can look like. And it's a lot to like hold, and definitely it can be a struggle to think about all of these really big questions without like burning out. But I also find that and this is a very big scope. I mean, I'm working on a project that was written for a PhD to do. I just have my undergrad degree, but I have some different life experiences that helped me get this job. And Yeah, and the scope is the entire Western United States. But when I focus more locally, there's like so much kind of groundedness that I find, and so I just wanted to like share this one picture. I'll hold it up to the screen. But this is like last weekend, and I'm this person on I guess that was the left or right side. I don't know for viewers, but this is a land stewardship event in the North Bay. And it's just people learning how to do a patch burn and like take care of the grassland that way. And when I'm like at an event like that that's place-based, I really feel like emotionally I can see the change on the ground. And there's lots of land stewardship events that anybody can volunteer for, and that helps me handle things like the climate crisis in a way that feels very tangible, and also like in partnership with others.
So for some reason my Zoom's glitching a bit, but I hope you guys can hear me. For me, when I reflect back at times where I've been really burnt out, one thing that stands out to me was that I was doing things that I wasn't super passionate about, or those things didn't resonate with me.
Mm.
And now, even though the days are really long, but I feel like the years are really short. And every time, or after a lot of days when I go home and I'm about to sleep, I just look back and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that have presented themselves. And I've been so grateful to do what I'm currently doing. And I think it's also a great privilege to do what you're passionate about, or to do things that stand out to you. But at times where I've been burnt out, I think for me the answer always has been my community and my friends, talking about my feelings, and then leveraging that has always been extremely helpful for me. And as I really echo what Kyle said, and it really resonates with me.
Do y'all have any experiences where, in talking about climate or climate fear, you experience people who are kind of avoiding or deflecting the topic? And if so, yeah, how do you approach that? How does it affect you?
Oh, that's a big theme, and I've had a lot of those conversations. I think the first step for me always has to acknowledge that I'm coming from a really privileged perspective. I've been privileged to get an education. Have been privileged to do research in the climate space, and have communities around me that are supportive of the idea of climate change, and also are interested in taking action about solving the climate crisis. And there are individuals that may not have those experiences or do not come from those backgrounds. And I feel like when we take on a stance that, oh, this person's wrong, or they do not believe in the same values as me, or labeling them a particular way, it really diminishes any room for conversation. And if we go in with that acknowledgement that, hey, it's the difference of opinion is more so because of difference of experiences, then the conversation becomes much easier. And I think the second step always has been to ask open-ended questions, to learn more about their perspectives and where they are coming from. And I think my biggest growth has come from those questions, from understanding what other people believe in and how their realities are so different at times from my realities. For instance, in Canada, they introduced a law about carbon tax, where individuals had to pay about 10 to 20% on every barrel of gas they buy as a taxable amount. And a lot of people were against it, and I was working with a political party at that time and wanted to get more opinions on why people were against it. And some of the things that stood out to me was a lot of people were struggling to put food on table, were struggling economically. And then when government was introducing laws that further impacted their abilities to be financially independent, it played a big role and drew them away from climate action and from the climate movement. So a lot of times it comes from not having a solid opinion about why other people believe in the values that they do, but in fact being open and acknowledging that those values come from their lived experiences and their lived realities.
How about for you, Kyle?
That was so well said. I honestly like this is a area that I think I'm still learning in. Um, just not necessarily around only how to talk with people who avoid or deflect climate conversations, but also around uh, kind of aspects of if people see differently, like their framing around the wildfire crisis is, or so-called wildfire crisis is different than mine, or these different aspects. And I think that what Inam shared about like learning that quote you had, a difference of opinion comes from difference of experience, is really powerful. Um, and so yeah, I think that like um I think one thing is just like creating those open spaces to learn from each other and being inquisitive. I really have nothing to add because I feel like like perfectly expressed it, and it's an area that I'm still learning and I'm excited to grow in.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's interesting how y'all responded. I had a totally different take on the question, and I'll share an experience I have often that I'm curious if you all have any advice on. I'll just bring it up here in some group therapy. I feel like the thing I experience the most, and also sometimes experiences even in myself, is whether it's climate or fear of rising authoritarianism and fascism, um, because there's a hyper-normalization, because we have to kind of keep on, there is a degree of having to keep on living. There's food that needs to be put on the table. There's jobs that need to be done. There's kids that need to be taken to school. It lends itself to normalization, right? So I struggle with the balance personally on how to be and to how do you build community and be in community, as we were saying earlier in the conversation, where it helps from a mental health perspective to be in conversation about these things, while also understanding that at any given time, it's sort of hard to understand whether someone needs to avoid the topic for mental health or when that avoidance is actually contributing to a state of hypernormalization that's, causing ill for our society collectively. And yeah, I mean, do y'all think about that? How do you handle it in your lives? We can also just all be collectively stumped, but perhaps we can together.
I think sometimes, and I don't have like a particular maybe example or life story, but it is something that I've struggled here and there to talk about, for example, with my family,
Mhm.
and wanting the closest people in my life to understand or feel a similar sense of passion or importance or prioritization on aspects like climate, but also other whether it's like social justice struggles or kind of lending ourselves and our energy, but also just like understanding the power dynamics. I feel like, especially growing up in a place like San Francisco and everything, there's so many power dynamics and so many histories that we haven't like learned or unlearned. And yeah, and so I think that what I've come to terms with like having different conversations with my family over time is like sometimes it can be difficult. There's like resistance when I'm pushing against or saying we're like you all are not doing enough. Like my mom is like a teacher, my dad works in like public radio. They both feel like they're serving the greater community and they're like we're doing our part. There's all these everyone does their part and I'm like we have to do the collective part like all together. Like what are we gonna do? And I think that just trying to see, what some of the entry points that they're excited about or are curious about, like, oh, can we go to this event together? Oh, do we want to try this? And then that seeing where that leads has been like at least a helpful thing with my family. And so just trying to see those parts of common ground and then grow and learn together in those parts. But that's just my personal experience, and I know that this is different for everybody and every community or family.
I think for me, it's a matter of being selective with the battles I pick. There are so many battles to pick, but very limited time and energy that we have. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, it also comes down to is it a right time to have that conversation? If the other person's angry or if they don't want to listen to you, that doesn't mean that conversation cannot happen. It just means that this is not a good time to have that conversation, and maybe we can do it at some other time. And even just acknowledging that let's reconvene this at some other time can honestly save a lot of relationships and a lot of tension between whether it's work relationships or personal relationships. So for me, it's just been a matter of being selective, realizing if it's a good time to have those conversations or not, and then acting accordingly.
Mhm. That really resonates with me too. I feel like the timing thing is a big deal. Just the concept that you can say, let's have this convo later, It's a good life skill in general, and asking consent to do that. And in cases where there's not a disagreement, right? There's just maybe a sensitivity difference on what can be handled in a conversation in that moment because of the scope and depth of what we're all facing. I've also found that the timing thing that you've pointed to helpful, Anam, and saying like, and just being honest, like, it's important to me to talk about this. It helps me, and being honest about needs. So could we do it at another time, even if we don't have solutions? And I've seen people respond well to that. So just to add some ideas in there. Okay, we're almost done with our questions here. We have 2 left. This one was submitted by someone, I think perhaps in attendance or who was interested in the webinar that in advance. And yeah, I think it's a hard one. It's, what do you all do with feelings of resentment if you have them towards older folks who did not act timely to avoid the current climate crisis?
That's a hard one to answer. I think for me, a lot of language around climate crisis more recently has been very negative, has been that, oh, we are doomed and there's nothing we can do about it. And we're bombarded with information, be it on social media or news platforms. And it's very easy to take the perspective that the generation before us could have done more or could have prevented what we are facing right now, which to some degree has its validity. But it can also apply to us that we right now aren't doing enough, and the future generations are going to blame us for not acting cohesively and not doing more than what we are doing currently. But if we look back 20 or 30 years from now, we also have made immense progress in the climate sector. We didn't have windmills or solar panels back in the 80s, and they have been a big advancement. I think almost 1 in 5 cars in the world are now EVs, which is also playing a massive role in reducing carbon emissions. We look at the Paris Agreement, and we look at how every country almost has signed that agreement and has committed to reducing their carbon impact. There's so many tons of examples of the progress that has happened in the last 20, 30 years, even though it has been at times slow, at times been fragmented, but that doesn't mean the progress hasn't happened. Now it is up to us to make sure that we amplify the work that future generations have done rather than blaming or rather than pointing fingers that if they did more, we right now wouldn't be doing this much work. I think my take on it might be a little controversial, but I think resentment doesn't lead to a solution. It just causes more problems. Rather than looking at what has happened, it's better to reflect on it and then find ways on where that generation went wrong and what we can learn from it so that our future generations do not blame us for their problems.
Can I ask you a follow-up question and press you a little bit since you're a mental health expert on this particular topic? I imagine the person who asked this probably wants to work through their feelings of resentment, right? So they're looking for strategies. And I think within what you shared were some strategies around thinking about there's a lot of hope and positivity in what you were sharing too. But let's say in the darkest soul of the night moment when there's just want to punch a wall about this, what's a practical therapeutic tool they could do to work through that resentment?
That's a great question. And I also want to give the disclaimer that I'm not a mental health expert. I'm a medical student, so we still haven't learned all the nuances regarding mental health. But some things that have worked for me, I can share. And if those resonate, feel free to try those. For me, one thing that has really helped me is meditation and mindfulness. I start my day by meditating for 20 minutes, and there's a particular kind of breath work that I found on YouTube that I have adopted for the last 4 or 5 years, and it has really worked well for me when I'm in distress or I'm feeling a certain way. Another tool that has really helped me is art and is working on things like those children books. And I'm trying to think, what else do I do? I also journal, and just going out in nature, I think, is such a great way as well. Some of you may be a little more fortunate than me, where, as Kyle mentioned, maybe a little warmer than where I am currently and can step out, go for a walk, go for a swim. And medically too, there's extensive evidence, and there's so many papers that are done about this, that if one steps out in nature for even 5 or 10 minutes, that can have very positive mental health benefits. So it can look as simple as stepping out, can be as complex as doing some artwork, but the most important thing is that you do something that brings you happiness, that grounds you and resonates with you.
That was great. Thank you. And thanks for your disclaimer too. This is not an era where many people are posing as medical professionals who are not. We don't want to do that enough. So thank you for that. How about for you, Kyle?
I think with the feelings of resentment conversation, I mean, creating a group of young people like FireGen, where a group of young people working in the fire space as fire practitioners, as Indigenous cultural practitioners, as wildland firefighters. And young people haven't really organized before in this space that I'm familiar with a particular intention of trying to reshape our future. And as we've been in different spaces like political spaces or whatnot, we could definitely feel like uh, we could come into those spaces feeling a sense of resentment towards, maybe the more established or older generation folks. But oftentimes the reception we receive is a lot of excitement that we're passionate about these issues, that we're working on them in our communities, and people want to hear about actually like what we have to say, which is my high school activist self would not like believe that, but there is, at least in some of these issues, a real sense of searching for solutions and wanting to learn from people who haven't been in the room before. And so that's been, some of our experience. Of course, there's a lot that we've struggled to get across, or that we're still building power around. And it's a multi-generational struggle and effort. But I think that for me, it's been helpful to change, my assumptions around how much action people are taking, and be able to just, bring ourselves and our lived experiences to these different spaces. And oftentimes people are really optimistic about the energy and the ideas that we're bringing forward.
Thank you both. Okay, we're near the end here. We have one more question from the Earth Island end, and I guess there's one question submitted. I know we're not technically supposed to do Q&A, but I feel like we can work it all together. So the last question we have is, what would you say to someone who feels powerless in the face of climate change? And perhaps relatedly, this question that was submitted is, wondering if you have any tips on how to get others interested or involved in one's climate action work, particularly if they're not like initially passionate, and who knows, maybe they're not initially passionate because they feel powerless. So maybe there's a tie-in there. Yeah. What do you do to not feel powerless in the face of climate change and to get others interested?
I think for me, I'm going to come back to the idea that community has been a very pivotal support that I rely on. And to somebody who's feeling powerless, what I would say is that you're not alone, that there are a lot of people that have carry those emotions or feel that way. And coming back to like the statistic that I mentioned, 50 to 60% of young people feel emotions related to eco grief. That is almost half of young people out there. And even at times, if it may feel isolating, if it may feel that you're powerless, I just want to tell you that you're not, because that is what 15-year-old Inaam felt. And the way I navigated that to some degree was coming up with creative solutions, was looking at what I was doing or the things that I was involved in, whether it was starting a club at my university or doing tours around the lake. There are immense ways you can contribute to the climate movement and really inspire action. So I think that feeling of powerlessness is common and is prevalent, but there's immense hope as well, as we talked about. And in terms of engagement, I feel like a lot of people are passionate about things initially. Initially is the big asterisk here, that appear really cool. Everybody wants to join that cool club at university or that cool club in high school. So if you can maybe frame whatever work you're doing from more of a cooler lens or market that really well, I think that will attract and will resonate with a lot of people. And we also see that young people around the world are more interested in climate movement, or are looking to find solutions and are looking to get involved. So if you can have something that resonates with them, or pitch your project in a way that makes it appear cool and makes it, really sells it, that if I hear it, I'm like, I really want to join this. How can I even not sign up? Then I think you have hit the mark, and you'll engage a lot of folks.
Okay, bring us home, Kyle, in our final minute here.
Okay, yeah, I would just say, be yourself too. I think that passion is contagious. I can tell from Jess and Inaam like how passionate both of you are, and people are drawn towards passion and positive energy. There's a lot to feel negative or frustrated about in this world, and it's really a wonderful experience to be around passionate and energetic people. And so don't be afraid to show how positive and how excited you are about some of these different like issues that you're working on, or about participating in local actions, or working on broader efforts, and show that like a joy, and be yourself, because people that is inherently gravitational, and I know that will always bring others to want to join you.
Beautifully said. All right, thank you all so much for being together this evening for this conversation. Wishing everyone a good evening or morning wherever they're tuning in from.